All right, welcome in Horse Racing Happy Hour, September 19, 2024 edition of the show. Matthew DeSantis alongside. My name is Louis Rabeau at Radio Louis on Twitter. Find the show at Horse Happy Hour, and we're all over the socials, people. Go find us Instagram, YouTube, wherever you want to be hanging out. If you're one of those youngins and you need the IG in your life, and by youngins, I mean anyone slightly younger than me at all. I mean, at all, just any of those things. And so, yes, if you're wondering, yes, I did have a run-in with the barber this morning. That's how these things go. But hey, here we are. His name is Matthew DeSantis at Failed to Menace on Twitter. Joins us from Long Island. How are things on Long Island, Matthew?
They're lovely. It's that time of year in New York where, summer's turning into fall. There's a little crispness in the air. To quote the great F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby, life starts all over again the first time it gets crisp in the fall. And so always love this time of year. And I'm right out by the beach. So just absolutely loving life. And, the nice part is we don't have to worry about conditions. It's fast and firm up here in New York. So we're thrilled about that.
How about that? It looks like we will have the same in outside of Philadelphia this weekend as well. In Matt's home state of Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania Derby. You have to remind me, Matthew, these are the moments when I ask people, hey, where did you come from? Where are you going? In your case, you're actually a Penn National first bet guy, correct?
Yeah. So I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is probably about an hour and a half outside of Philadelphia. Be an hour if we had better roads. But I ultimately Grantville, which is where Penn National is about 45 minutes from where I grew up. And so my
Sure.
dad took me there when I was 11 years old, and I turned $20 of allowance money into $26. Thank you very much.
Let's
And
go.
I was
ROI.
hooked. Exactly. And so, I've been playing ever since, but I always love Parx too. And love to see, obviously, that track shine on its big day, and thrilled that we're going to have better weather on Saturday than we did last year, which was just a
Oh,
monsoon, if people remember.
Oh, yeah, they got the absolute deluge of deluges last year. I'm stunned that they ran the turf monster. I can't imagine what that turf course was like. But I wanted to say, one of the things about the home track or whatever, it's amazing what people will think of as their home track, how far away that is, that kind of thing. And the other part is, I was interviewing Grant Forster about a
Yeah.
month and a half, I guess, wow, 2 months ago now. Trainer Grant Forster, yeah, the winner in the Indiana Oaks this year. And it was right before that. And he said, one of the cool things about having a horse in the Oaks is you just get to be part of a track's big day, right? And so there's something
Yeah.
cool about just being involved in the big day. You and I happen to be at Monmouth together this year for the Haskell, and there's something just fun about being at another track's big day, right? It's such, I don't want to call it an honor, but it is. It's sort of an honor to be at somebody's, be at their big day for sure.
It is. You get the razzle dazzle. And in the case of Monmouth, you just have an open bar in the paddock. And
Yes,
I
they
mean,
do.
that's just spectacular. Quite frankly, every track should have that on their big day. And it is, it's really special. And the really cool part, and Louis, you know this from following all the Kentucky Derbies and Kentucky Oaks, is it's also a big deal to be racing on the undercard of those
Mm.
big days. And so many times connections will save a maiden who they're really high on to run on the undercard of the Pennsylvania Derby, the Haskell, and certain big days up here in New York, the Travers, the Jim Dandy. It's not a mistake that I believe last year we saw Seize the Gray beat Dornoch in a maiden special weight race on the undercard of the Whitney. And so you see those types of horses debut on big days like that. And so that makes even the first couple of races on the card exciting too.
No, that's absolutely correct. And it's so often that we'll refer to, oh, he ran on Derby weekend, or that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Oh, he ran
Yep.
during Derby week, and you might not remember that it was Thursday or Wednesday or whatever, but you remember
Right.
he ran during Derby week for sure. And no,
Yep.
you're totally right about that. But Forster was talking about, of course, he's a Pacific Northwest guy. He was
Yep.
talking about being, part of the races up there, the Long Acres Mile, that kind of stuff, and just how special it is to be, whether it's Indianapolis or Seattle or whatever, just to be,
Yeah.
at the track on the biggest day. I'm going to have Jessica Paquette on 680 tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was going through the sort of resume that she has, of course, Colonial Downs, other places that
Yeah.
she's been. I was trying to figure out, I was talking to Tom Law, who's done, he was past president of the HBP or the NCAA, and he's doing all the pub for them this week. If another female track announcer has called a grade 1 before, and he couldn't come up with one.
No. She was
Yeah,
the
right.
first. She was
Yeah.
the first last year, and that was really cool. I remember I had just started at Naira Betts, and I was there for Pennsylvania Derby Day, and I actually interviewed her the day before, and she was about to make history, being the first track announcer to ever call a Grade 1 race anywhere in the world. And it was just a really cool moment to be able to chat with her a little bit, because just a little bit of backstory. When I first started making content, and this is probably about 4 years ago, on my own little show that I had called the Win Place Show, that had minimal followers, but I was just starting out, Jess took time and was a guest on my show anytime I asked, and she would come on, was always incredibly gracious with her time. And I remember the day after I had her on my show the first time, she was part of a front page story in the New York Times, like a profile. And I messaged her and I said, "Well, you're welcome. It's all because of my little show."
That's right.
So,
that's right. Failed to menace. How about not failing, huh? How about that? Moving up in the world, helping people with their lives. No, because it's interesting, these conversations, because I'm going to ask her about it tomorrow. And
yeah,
I think people approach those kinds of, I don't want to call them milestones, but those kinds of, moments, I think is probably just the better thing, with very different approaches. Like I asked Trainer Cherie DeVoe over the summer if she sees herself as one of the great female trainers. She's like, I don't really think about that at all. I think of myself as just another trainer, and I was like,
right.
well, Brittany Russell and Linda Rice. And she's like, no, they're just trainers. That's just what we do, And so I wondered, what Jessica's answer will be about that, but it's not a nothing for sure. Right.
Oh no, it was a big deal. And it was, what's interesting, I think everybody focused on the PA Derby, but of course the Cotillion's a Grade 1 right before that. And so it was actually calling the Cotillion was actually the kind of record setting or record breaking or glass, ceiling shattering moment for her, was calling that Cotillion last year. So it was a special day last year, despite the terrible weather. And, now she gets to do it again this time around. And it's two interesting fields. I mean, obviously a big superstar in the Cotillion, and then I think a really wide open Pennsylvania Derby field.
Yeah. Both races, by the way, have had unbelievably great histories. Just in the last 10 years of the Pennsylvania Derby, the winners are Saudi Crown, Taba, Hot Rod Charlie, Math Wizard, McKinsey, West Coast, Connect, Frosted, Byron, and Will Take Charge. If you put together, Matthew, I'm not kidding, like any 3-year-old male race, that stands up against essentially any of them.
It really does. And it's because almost every 3-year-old race has a couple of clunkers. I mean, no disrespect to the horses that won, but there's a couple where you go,
the Kentucky Derby. Yeah, right. Yes.
Well, right. I wasn't gonna start upsetting people in the Bluegrass State right away. But it was, you do see it, and or sometimes you look at the Preakness, or even
that's right.
in the Belmont. I mean, even those races where you go, well, who is that? You kind of go scratch your head. Oh yeah, he did win that race. Sort of thing, and that's as good a list of 3-year-olds, prominent 3-year-olds of the last 10 years that you're going to find pretty much so anywhere. So I mean, it is, right. While I know this year's field has not necessarily gotten the high profile attention, the history of this race is very, very impressive.
I wanted to give a shout out to someone before we go on with the show. Roger Browning, watching with us, one of those guys in Indianapolis that hangs out with us here on the Horse Racing Happy Hour. He had the winner 2 years ago of the Turf last year, last year's a winner of the Turf Monster and Nobody Listens, who tragically died on his way back to Indianapolis. And so, no, I know, Roger, this is an emotional week for you. So thanks for hanging out with the show. I'm not sure I would be able to watch things about Pennsylvania Derby weekend. So I appreciate you making time to hang out with us. But yeah, just that incredible Turf Monster. They had, legitimate Breeders' Cup hopes for that horse as well. And we'll see if there is another great sprinter out of that race, considerably better conditions for that race this coming weekend, for sure.
Much better. I mean, that was rough, but yeah, this year much better conditions. And I just remember last year, even on the main track, just like puddles forming, basically hanging out on the inner rail. And there are some stories that maybe I'll tell you after we stop recording about some jockeys and trainers who were not very fond of certain things that were taking place that day. So
that's the other thing about I tell people, horse racing and college football, you got to show up because the weather doesn't matter. NHL Fanatic saying hi to you for joining on the show tonight. Appreciate you guys all jumping in on the Horse Racing Happy Hour tonight. By the way, the past winners of the Cotillion include last year, Steve Kornacki did this episode. So you're filling in for Steve Kornacki today, by the way. That's just
I feel that's appropriate.
no pressure. And so he picked Ceiling Crusher on this show. He got it totally right, by the way. He was like, I don't really care about the conditions. I love her form in California. I think she's a winner. And he screenshots the whole thing, sent them to me. I'm like, that's Steve Kornacki. How about that guy? Before that, though, Society, Clariere, Midnight Bizu, Songbird, Untappable, Plum Pretty, Avra de Grace. I mean, the list of winners of the cotillion, man. It's like Acorn level. It's Met Bile level. I mean, it's that good.
It is that good. And again, I think we have a filly who's probably going to etch her name into history in that group this year. And it certainly has the potential to with Torpedo Anna. And so it's a great group historically. And it's funny, Ceiling Crusher was a horse I really liked going into that race last year. And I think actually might have been my top pick in that race. I'd have to go back and look at all the stuff I wrote. But but I remember liking that horse, showing up on Pennsylvania Derby Day. And there's a guy, Andrew Rudinsky, who kind of covers Parx a little bit for In the Money Media. Nice guy, young kid. And he's always at the track. And Andrew talked to some of Doug O'Neill's people. And he said, they're treating this race like the Breeders' Cup. And I was like, put it all on Ceiling Crusher. I was like, just put it all on Ceiling Crusher. And it was the idea of like, this was their big race. They weren't going to make it to the distaff. So this was the race for this horse. This was the chance to get the grade 1. And it was like, all right, like let's then, just sometimes that mentality of this horse is fully cranked up, ready to go for this race. We're leaving something in the tank for the next one. That tells you all you need to know sometimes.
Yeah, we are live right now with our friends at the Sporting Tribune. You can find them at Sporting Trib on Twitter as well. And I wrote about the Derby prep this last weekend, Matthew. We had our first one in the Iroquois.
Yeah.
I used to totally ignore that race, except a man named Larry Demerit took a horse named West Saratoga, won that race last year, and then meandered his way down the Derby trail all the way to the freaking starting gate and did the darn thing. Got to meet some very nice people on the Demerit team last year as well as part of our Derby Week coverage here on our local ESPN affiliate. And so I have a new respect for the Iroquois because I think it had been 2006 since the last even starter hit even got to the starting gate. But Jonathan's Way wins this race and frankly does it in a way that is impossible to ignore. Right. Okay. And Ohio bred, we're going to set all those things aside for sure. But look, I think this is the kind of horse that makes sense as far as his breeding, as far as his running style. Indian Charlie on the dam side of all of it seems to add up. I think you had two horses right behind him, one who's going to be a sprinter, one who will want to go longer actually as well. I think the third place horse in this race, for example, Jacoso, ends up probably being a turf horse because of all the breeding on his dam side as well. But, hey, if the purse is there, you run for $300,000. It just is what it is. What did you think of Jonathan's Way? Do you think that's a horse that we could see pretty prominently in the spring?
I think so. And I think he's a pretty serious horse. And I was, on with you on ESPN radio before the Friday before that race. And we talked about this horse. And I said, just how impressed I was by his debut because things didn't go as planned. When you have a debut and suddenly you get pinched between two horses and you find yourself sitting second to last, that's not a position most young 2-year-old horses are comfortable doing, taking kickback and being behind other runners. And for that horse to then make a move the way he did, if you go back and watch the replay of that maiden race, so impressive because he just made a move 4 wide around the turn like it was just no problem and just gave up all the ground knowing that he could just easily win that race, and he did. And then for him to come back and show so much superior speed in the Iroquois and just take him basically gate to wire just shows incredible versatility from a young horse. And there's a maturation that this horse has in terms of a mental maturation, a physical maturation. The 89 Beyer speed figure certainly matches up and more than compares with what we've seen a lot of other top 2-year-olds do. So I'm happy for Phil Bauer. I thought Caitlin Free had a great interview with him afterwards where, he kind of talked about, he's had a lot of good fillies and now this is a chance to have some really good colts here. And Jonathan's Way, I think, is absolutely a horse that you're going to have to take seriously come springtime and even looking ahead to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
And of course, Phil Bauer, a smaller group because he does train privately for Rigney Racing. They did spend a significant amount of money on this horse. And so good for them to get some return on that as well. By the way, the winner Before, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say to that point, it reminds me a little bit of what's going on with Ferocious as well. Ferocious was a really big purchase for Ramiro Restrepo and that group and Delgado, and they
Sure.
usually don't
Yep.
go after $1.3 million horses in that group. They usually are going after $250,000 horses or less, which is what Mage was. And so that's interesting that you had these two kind of smaller mid-level trainers ownership groups really taking a big swing with these two respective horses who, oh, by the way, just turned out to be two of the top, I don't know, 3 or 4 2-year-olds now in the country.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Phil Bauer, of course, this year has had 91 starters, 20 wins. So it's not as though he doesn't know what he's doing, folks.
Right.
He definitely does.
Yeah.
It's just this getting to the starting gate for the Kentucky Derby is a different ask, though. It's a very different process. It's a very different thing in its own right. And so if this horse makes it or not doesn't mean that he did a poor training job by any stretch, but rather just how difficult it is. I have to mention that the winner was Court Vision in 2007. In 2008, won the Hollywood Derby, and then, of course, the year after won the Breeders' Cup Mile. So obviously, you could win the Iroquois and go on to just a fine of a career as well. Again, he's Matthew DeSantis. He's with Naira Betts. You can find him on Twitter at Failed to Menace. I'm Louis Rabeau at Radio Louis on Twitter. I was gonna do the blind rankings with you, and then I lost my producer, so I can't do both. And I'm not gonna pretend that I know how to do both. I'm not that guy. I'm not yet. Not yet. I'm not yet. 43, not 44. You understand me? I got time. And so the last 10 winners, I was gonna have you blind rank the last 10 Pennsylvania Derby winners. By the way, I set it up perfectly last week. I got Illman to put Justify as the 5th best Derby winner in the last 10 years. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, Louis Rabeau just setting it up. Let's go. It was fantastic. And so, but of these winners, I'll mention them again. Saudi Crown, Taba, Hot Rod Charlie, Math Wizard, McKinsey, West Coast Connect, Frosted Byron, and Will Take Charge. Do you have a favorite of those horses?
Oh God, do I have a favorite? I mean, a part of me is always going to love Frosted, but God, I would have to say out of that group, honestly, I'm looking at it because you had texted me this group as well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a little recency bias, but hold all tickets. I like Hot Rod Charlie. That horse, I just always liked that horse. He always found trouble one way or another. And because there was even like a long objection in that Pennsylvania Derby, if you remember. As well with him and Midnight Bourbon, and those two kind of had went back and forth. Obviously, Midnight Bourbon falls in the Haskell and comes back to then run really well after that. So it was, but Hot Rod was always a horse I always really liked. I mean, how could you not? I think the ownership group, bunch of young guys, getting behind that horse, and so that was one. But what I will say is the other horse I wanted to shout out is McKinsey, who has suddenly become quite the first crop sire that we have this year, and is the sire to Chancellor McPatrick, who we just saw win the Hopeful up in Saratoga. So I feel like sometimes when you see horses like Gunrunner and McKinsey now on some of these lists, it's so interesting to see how people's estimation of their horses, of those horses, grow because of their second career as a sire suddenly.
Yeah, Connect stands out on the list for that, right? For me at least, right? As far as the breeding side of things and what that's turned into in his with his progeny especially. And so it's an interesting list. And Gandolfo, who did this show until 2 weeks ago because he's a bum, was a big fan of Hot Rod Charlie because his grandfather, who got him into horses, was named Charlie, and he sold cars for a living. So,
oh my God,
joke goes, and I think was it Breeders' Cup Juvenile? He ran second at like 50-1 or 60-1 or something. I think that's the story. Yeah. Mike was like, you know what? I got to put $5 on this horse. And he didn't bother to go across the board. And he always bets horses across the board. And it's one of the great stories because we're standing there and he goes, and I'm like, oh man, he finished second. Good for you, Mike. Good for you. And he's like, I didn't bet him across the board. Mike, no, what are we doing? Like, oh, that was fantastic. So, oh man, just one of those great moments at the track.
Oh God.
Hot Rod Charlie. I'll remember that story almost certainly forever. NHL Fanatic wants to know, man, is Unmatched Wisdom the wise guy horse for Saturday? I have a problem here, Matthew, and we need to get into it. So we had a buzz horse for the Iroquois, and now we got a wise guy horse for the Pennsylvania Derby. I want to be clear with our friend NHL Fanatic. I am okay with wise guy horses. I'm not okay with buzz horses for Derby preps. What says Matthew DeSantis?
Yeah, and by the way, thank you to Kevin for putting another jinx on another buzz. Churchill Downs.
You know what?
And
Yeah.
so
You know what's funny is actually I got it wrong in the broadcast. He was totally right. He was on Jonathan's way. I mentioned the wrong horse when we were talking. So he was totally right.
funny.
So in
That's
the
funny.
piece at the Sporting Tribune, I gave him all of the credit that I could. I opened the article with the guy because I said it wrong on Friday with you. Yeah.
I love it. That's hysterical. It's interesting. I think Unmatched Wisdom. Here's what I would say: if Unmatched Wisdom's morning line was 7-2, I don't think he'd be a wise guy horse.
Yeah. Right.
I think.
Right. All right. Let me check my connection here. There we go. Sorry about that.
Sorry. And
okay.
so I was just saying, like, if Unmatched Wisdom's morning line was
more
7-2, I don't think he'd be considered that. But I agree, he's the horse that everybody's looking at on the morning line, going, if we can even get him at 4-1, 9-2, like that would be a great price to be able to get on that type of a horse, because Dragoon Guard. We can start diving into this if you want, but like Dragoon Guard, his numbers don't really stand out over the rest of the field at all. And I mean, he's kind of one. He gives me a lot of Arthur's Ride vibes of a horse that's managed to like just get out up on the front end and kind of carve out fractions without really being pressed. And now suddenly you're in a race with Seize the Gray, Unmatched Wisdom, and Just Step on It, all who want to be forward. That's going to be tough.
I can't remember a race of this level with this many front runners and a 1.125 two-turner. I can't. I mean, this is just a stunning number of horses that are going to want to be near the front, like you mentioned. I mean, I think the only hunter buyer in this field is Seize the Gray in the Preakness, right? I mean, and so it is.
That's correct.
That one stands out, and so it is. There's going to be, if there's a chance at least of that kind, what you just mentioned, this pace explosion at the beginning of the race, essentially, who might it be behind that group of horses? He's going to be part of that group of horses. We'll get into it. I like another horse around those odds, and when we get to the Pennsylvania Derby, I will explain why it's one of those. Matthew, I'm sure you have these moments. You look at the past performances and you're like, why do I love this horse? Why do I love this horse? Why do I love this horse? And then you just finally go with it. By the way, Seize the Gray was that horse in the Preakness for me. And Get Smokin' was that horse in the United Nations for me this year. So I'm going to trust this one as well, because I'm 2 for 2 on those horses, and I'm going to try to make it 3 for 3 as we move forward. But of course, our show is presented by Manscaped. Manscaped.com. The promo code for us is horse racing. You get 20% off and free shipping to your house. Make sure that you get in with them. I've actually heard from my neighbors. Hear me out. Wait for it. I've heard from my neighbors that they have their teen sons learning how to shave with the different Manscaped products. If you need something safer, on the more like foil side, you can definitely get that with our friends at Manscaped. Manscaped.com, promo code horse racing. And of course, hey, maybe it's still beach season where you live and you need to not look like a woolly mammoth. Go ahead, check out our friends at Manscaped. They've got all the very best products there. If you have a beard like Matthew, by the way, man, they've got great beard conditioners and the lotions and different things for you as well. So go ahead and check them out. Manscaped.com, promo code horse racing, 20% off your purchase with them. All right. Tons of stakes on the card. You mentioned, by the way, trying to get into the maiden races on this day. They're 100K in Philly this weekend, right? So it is, they got 18 horses entered for a maiden race this weekend. So make sure you're checking out all of the different bets available at Parx this weekend. But let's go ahead. I mean, Next is running in the Greenwood. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on the Greenwood. But how many times have you gotten to watch Next in person? I don't think I've seen him in person.
I've seen him 4 times in person. That's awesome. And I saw him last year. I've seen him the 2 Greenwood Cups that he's won. And I saw him this year up at Aqueduct, and I saw him at Saratoga as well. So yeah, this will be my 5th time. He's amazing. And it's just so
he's cool, right?
And I also am so happy obviously for Dan Cowens, but also for Luan Machado, who, puts in a lot of time down in your neck of the woods and at Turfway Park, and, really grinds it through this winter. And for him just to get a special horse like this to ride. And I just love seeing Luan come up and stay on the ride, and, always a big fan of the Axeman. And so, that's going to be fun. And he just doesn't have an equal. And he's just so dominant. And I get people wanting him to maybe go shorter. And in my heart of hearts, I would love to see him run at 1.25 miles and see what happened.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about
that. Would have been a lot of fun. But I also like seeing greatness and just go out and do your thing.
Yeah. David Aragona, who does the lines up where you are, and does frankly as good a job as anyone in the country. He was talking about, hey, this might be a category that's going away. Why are they running horses? Why are they running next only in these kinds of races? And to that, number one, I think the easy answer is, well, the races do exist right now and you can go get the checks. But the second part is we got 10 horses for this field, man. It's not like, we forget that running for second stinks for the jockey, but it doesn't stink for the ownership in a $200,000 race.
So I'll tell this story now. I was going to tell the story off air, but I'll tell the story now, and I'll protect some names. But last year in the Greenwood Cup,
a little redaction on the horse racing happy.
I'll redact a little bit, but I will say last year in the Greenwood Cup, if people remember, and all you have to do is look at the PPs, know who I'm talking about. But there was next wins by 20 plus lengths. The horse that was in second appeared to safely be in second. And the jockey on the second place horse, quite frankly, kind of stood up and was riding the horse through the puddles, thinking, I got this. And it was a relatively inexperienced jockey is busting his ass to get to the line at 69-1 and gets up for second by a nose over the horse that was, I think, second choice that day. And I will just say that there was a very displeased trainer at that jockey immediately after that race, because you're right. There's a big difference between second and third place money in a $200,000-$300,000 stakes race. And, run through the wire. It doesn't matter if the other horse is 20 lengths ahead. You got to worry about winning your next race just to be second. So, no, it's a big deal to get second and, to be grade 3 placed. Those are things that are important for connections and for horses' futures.
It reminds me of the Flightline Pacific Classic. I'm gagging for the name of the Baffert horse that ran second, but
was it Country? No, it wasn't Country Grammar.
One Country Grammar. I'm forgetting who it was right now, but anyways, Baffert said that Flightline was so far ahead that his horse thought he won. It was confused why he wasn't going to the winner circle. Yeah, I love that kind of story. So I imagine with next last year, the Greenwood, that second place finisher thought he had really done the work and got up to second place.
Right. Yeah, he thought he won it. I mean, it's so incredible to see just how easily he pulls away from everybody, and he's shown so much versatility, and he's such an interesting horse too. And he's a little bit of a quirky horse, but it's really great to see that they figured out what he does well. And man, he does it as good as anybody we've seen lately.
If someone wanted to play the pick 4 there, Matthew, where next is in the Greenwood Cup and then it goes, through the Turf Monster, some other races, the mile there, how would you play that pick 4? Are you trying to catch a price of the other legs, or are you understanding, hey, next is part of this? We're essentially playing a pick 3. Play it for $1, play it for $2, play it for $3 if you can.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I approach that kind of latter approach of going, listen. If the horse racing gods are going to give you a free square, don't spit in their face about it. Don't try to outthink yourself sometimes, and just go and look at the next leg, and maybe you can find a price there. And I actually think that some of those other races are a little bit more contentious around that Greenwood Cup. So if you can find a 6-1 and 8-1 horse that can kind of get you a little bit of a price in the second leg, that's great. But I've always been of the opinion, don't try to outthink yourself. And, Di Vernon is a nice horse at 10-1 in that Greenwood Cup, but I'm not picking Di Vernon and I'm not fading next off of that, or I'm not including another horse and next. Certainly that would be sacrilegious, but it's just being smart about those sorts of things. And I like putting together skinny tickets. I don't mind putting together a $8 pick 4 ticket or something like that, and having, there might be 2 heavy favorites in there, but I might throw in a couple of prices in the other 2 legs, and it might only pay $38, but it only cost me $8 to put it together. And so, if I do it 2-3 times, it's going to pay off.
The second finisher was Country Grammar. So congratulations, you win. Royal Ship finished third, and Express Train filling out the ever popular Flightline Superfecta. So there you are at Santa Anita, or excuse me, at Del Mar.
Here's a little quiz for you, Louis.
Oh boy, quizzes. Here we go.
What horse finished closest to Flightline in his career?
I'm going to go with Olympiad. Is that possibly correct?
It is not, but it's a good guess.
Okay.
It is Happy Saver.
How about that? That is random. Okay. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay. I'm not going
Bingo.
to lie to you.
There you go.
Was
You
that the
can
Matt
use
Mile?
that one. Yeah, that mile. You can use that
Okay. All right.
anytime you
Okay.
want.
It's all yours. This free information that I do, you could also use it. How about that? All right. The Turf Monster, shout out to our guy. I want to pull him up again here. Our guy, Roger Browning. Emotional weekend for him. Had last year's winner with Nobody Listens. We got to party on my birthday at Turfway Park when he won the Big Daddy in 2022. Before that, of course, and then went on to a really, really great career after that. But the Turf Monster is 5 furlongs. The Breeders' Cup distance on the turf there at Parx. Go for $250,000 for 3-year-olds and up here. I thought this was an interesting field, actually, and I think one where you can get creative or you can kind of just press on horses you like. We get horses coming out of Saratoga like Super Quest, who I thought ran really well behind Big Invasion last time out, beat Our Shot before that as well. But I think, 6, 7, and 8 in here. Allegon for Edward Allard in here. Maybe Robert Reed's horse in 4. Harp, the 7, I think at a longer price might have something. Sen Bay coming in here. Anybody stand out to you in this field?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with your kind of initial thoughts, and I ultimately landed on the 6 as my top selection, Allegon. I just thought this one at 5-1 presented some decent value. Essentially won the prep race for the Parx Dash back in August, and this is a horse that has some really nice races to run back to. You look back, was just in over his head 3 back in the Jaipur, and I felt like maybe pressed things a little too much last time or 2 back. The one thing I'll say about this horse is I really like this horse specifically at 5 furlongs. I actually think that's kind of where I want this horse. And so like this one a lot. Good tactical speed, should be able to sit just behind the pace of Super Quest and Jean Valjean, the number 4. So those two presumably are going to go at it. And then I also identified as if you're going to take a shot with a bigger price, 4 Harp makes a ton of sense. Willing to just kind of toss that effort last time out on the dirt, obviously in an off-turf race. But, you look at some of those other efforts, pretty solid, including, losing to a horse like Surveillance and running with Scissors, who are both pretty nice horses. And, was kind of going to, I think, make that next step in that third start in the form cycle. And like I said, ultimately that race got taken off the turf. Another one I like at 5 furlongs specifically, good early speed there.
Yeah, tons of everybody's going to be in town this weekend for these races as well. So you'll see all the connections that you are very familiar with in this one as well. Moving on to the next race is the Gallant Bob. It's a grade 2, 400K here, 6 furlongs on the dirt. And without being terribly rude, Matthew, I was thinking back to 5 years of doing this show. I can't remember a grade 2 with a field like this. This is... we do our own grading system here on the Horse Racing Happy Hour. We have for a very long time. This is a listed plus for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all.
Okay.
It was,
which by the way can mean great betting opportunity, frankly, is what it can mean.
Right. And I think that's such an important distinction to make, and something I try to emphasize when people go, that's a disappointing field. Okay, it might be a disappointing field from what you expect a grade 1 or a grade 2 or a grade 3 to look like. That doesn't mean it's a disappointing betting field. And those are kind of different things sometimes. And so, and also, this as well. These things ebbs and flows. 1 year a race looks pretty weak, and the next year you go, man, they got a bunch of monsters running in this grade 2. Right. So sometimes it's just the nature of the racing calendar and the crop and just who is active and who's not. And, and this is the group we ended up with this year. And so I think honestly,
it's also, by the way, it's restricted to 3-year-olds. So, I mean, this is going to happen sometimes. Once in a while, you're just going to have a sprinter crop like this.
And I'll be honest, I think if anybody's to blame for this is the fact that the H. Allen Jerkins was so incredibly loaded with talent that I think a lot of horses kind of took some time maybe after that race. And I honestly, there are probably 3 or 4 horses from that race who probably should have come here instead, in my opinion. And then the field would have looked a lot better. But obviously you take a shot in a grade 1, I get it. But yeah, this one, listen, you could look at the number 1, Ben Tornado for Jose D'Angelo, second back from the international start, running in the Saudi Derby, finished behind Forever Young and Bookham Dano. Listen, I'm not going to talk anybody off of that horse at 9-5 if you want to go with that one. But I do think the number 3, Bucciarino, is at least a little bit of an interesting play here. A horse that's, won last time out at Parx, going 6.5 furlongs, and won easy over Maximus Meridius and Sunny Breeze, who are both in this field as well. and has some good early speed. I don't know, this one at 4-1. It's hard to say this horse's value because it's essentially the second choice, but I still think there's at least something interesting about that horse, and maybe that horse is able to take a step forward. And the other part is, with Ben Tornado breaking on the rail, I always get a little worried about horses breaking from the rail on the sprints. And just if you don't get out exactly cleanly, sometimes that inside path just all of a sudden closes off to you.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to watch the start of this race, as you mentioned. I do wonder with Bucarino if that was a one-off or if this is something sustainable for that horse that was second off the layoff last time, second in the form cycle. Now you hope with a bullet work just a week ago at Parx that would be, translating into the speed here as well, training on the dirt course there, going the 6.5 in that race. I mean, the horse didn't need 6.5. This horse could have won at 5. This horse could have won at 4.5, frankly, right? Got the lead, kept the lead, pulled away at the end there. Jose Loscano, by the way, it should be said, has been down for 13 races this year at Parx, has won 13 of them. So this is a course where he's very comfortable, has won these races. And so if you see Loscano next to a horse on Saturday, might be one to look at as well. I thought a potential longer shot here that could be interesting is the out of the Allard barn, Sunny Breeze. That horse did not show up well last out in that sprint. If it's the course, then I'll be happy to be wrong, but I think that horse is going to run a better race this weekend.
I'd agree more. I just finished editing my episode of Capping the Card where I go through all 14 races with my top pick, my top value play. My top pick was the Bucarino. My top value play was Sunny Breeze. I completely agree with you on that spot. I think 8-1 is a really good price. And this is a horse that won a stakes race going 7 furlongs off Lasix 2-back. So, that's one where the Lasix question was already answered. The horse can run off Lasix. I'm not worried about that. Can go longer if necessary, can do a little bit more distance, has a little bit more foundation. And yeah, I think just maybe didn't quite, was pressing a little bit that day and then just kind of faded. I think comes back with a little bit of a better effort there. And I think you're going to get a really good price for connections who, by the way, Edward Allard and Jaime Rodriguez win at a 43% clip over the last year with a $3.44 ROI. So just flat betting them is really not a bad deal.
That's exactly right. In this field, Bucarino, who you mentioned as your top pick, 3 for 3 lifetime at Parx as well. The Cotillions, the next race, one of the absolute gems of this part of the season in horse racing. Mile and a 16th on the dirt there. Go for 3-year-old fillies, $4 million. They're a little like Grand Slam tennis, Matthew. The ladies, they run for the same amount of money as the men. Who did you land on in the Cotillion that's not named Torpedo Anna? I have to say, every week I try to identify the race that can make you the most money if you're a contrarian. Okay.
Yeah.
I think this weekend it's Torpedo Anna because with next, I don't think it's in a part of the card that's going to get a ton of money. And so I think Torpedo Anna, Torpedo Anna's probably your chance to really maximize, say, the late pick 5 or something like that, which is a mandatory, by the way. I know they have the jackpot, Big Philly 5 there at Parx. It is a mandatory payout on Saturday, so they will be paying it out. Torpedo Anna, though, how many times have you gotten to see her run? I've only seen her the one time at the Oaks.
I've only seen her one time in person. Actually, I was holed up inside my office, I think, for the Coaching Club America Oaks.
Okay.
But I got to see her obviously run in that Travers, and that was what an effort. I mean, that's as good as you can see a horse run. I mean, she just ran so well that day. And I think the big question is there going to be a bounce, right? And, if you look at the numbers, she kind of outran everything she's done before. What I would say is 2 things. One, I do think sometimes Beyer tends to be, if you're using Beyer speed figures, I do think they tend to be, I'm not going to say sexist, but I do think sometimes filly and mares races are downgraded a little bit from what some of the numbers are for the boys. The other thing is, if you watch her previous races when she's running 96, 99 Beyers, Brian Hernandez Jr. is not asking her for everything. She's running those numbers at 90%, 85%. And what we saw at the Travers was when she's asked for 100% what she's able to do. That's pretty damn impressive. And I got to give a ton of credit to Kenny McPeak, who has been incredibly transparent throughout this whole process. The videos that he's been posting of her, she looks even better, quite frankly, than she did before the Travers. She looks bigger. She looks like she put on weight. Doesn't look like that race took a lot out of her. So I get people wanting to play against her in this spot. I don't I don't blame them. I don't begrudge them. And from a betting standpoint, that's exactly, you're 100% right. That's how you're going to make money in this sequence, is zigging against her. And the horse that I really like, that I keep coming back to, is the number 2 Scalable. And I like this horse because this horse closed into really slow fractions last time out at the Monmouth Oaks and beat Gunsong, and was able to close into a fraction that was 113 and change to the 6 furlongs, and went about 4 wide under Paco Lopez and still managed to win that race. And those aren't necessarily ingredients that you see coming from off the pace at Monmouth, going wide behind slow fractions. I mean, that's not a winning recipe a lot of times. This is a horse I've always kind of liked for Todd Pletcher. And it feels like maybe this horse, I know that 89 kind of came out of nowhere from a buyer speed figure standpoint, but you look at the rest of the fillies here, and there's really not much else that's better than an 89 in a lot of cases. So at 10-1, I'll take a shot with a horse like Scalable. And even if I end up using Torpedo Anna up top, I might just do a simple, 6-2 exactor or something like that and just, see where that goes.
Yeah, I think that's a totally reasonable play, and I think you're probably going to get 12-1 in that spot. So that's the best way probably to use Torpedo Anna in any kind of ticket. The interesting one to me is Cinemara, because I don't quite know what to make of her. And we've actually seen this year, last year on the Derby Trail, we had to watch the Rebson and horses coming out of Aqueduct. They ran well when they came out of that race. Horses are running well out of Delaware right now, and it's an interesting year-to-year thing that sort of happens. Obviously, Power Squeeze wins that race. Cinemara was the favorite in that race, if people remember. First time off Lasix, I thought she looked really good. She closed in that race. Frankly, if she gets ahead, she loses by a nose. If she doesn't lose that, or she wins in that photo finish, I think we're talking about her really differently. I think you're going to get a solid 5-1 type of number on her on Saturday. So she might be my horse that I would use in the exacta this weekend to get some value as well, of course. That is Bill Mott and Jose Ortiz. I will talk about Bill Mott now as we preview the Pennsylvania Derby. His horse is the one that I cannot get off. We're going to Mile and an Eighth on the dirt 3-year-olds, of course. $1 million on the line just outside of Philadelphia. And look, this is an interesting field. Let's be clear. You get a grade 1 winner in here. You got the Santa Anita Derby winner in Stronghold making the trip from California. We have seen California horses travel very well in the past. Those winners, McKenzie, we've seen West Coast, obviously Taba. Yeah. We've seen those horses come in from out west and show up really, really big in this race. So I expect that I think Stronghold, I don't know if he wins here, but I think he'll run at least a respectable race. You mentioned Dragoon Guard, all the questions there for sure with him. And of course, our guy, NHL Fanatic, asked about Unmatched Wisdom for this weekend, but where did you end up landing? Who is your winner for the Pennsylvania Derby?
Yeah, so I was, from the very beginning, I was against Dragoon Guard, and I was against Stronghold simply because of the post position being kind of marooned out in post 11. I think it's a tough spot for him. I think he might get the right sort of trip, though, because he does like to track the pace rather than be on the pace, and so he can sit right behind that speed. And so if Antonio Fresu can kind of work out the right trip, then that might be interesting. I do worry about him, though. I'm not an acolyte to buyer speed figures, but he's never bested a 90. I mean, he feels a little slow maybe for this race. So we'll see. I ultimately landed on Unmatched Wisdom, which is not a particularly original idea, I don't think. And I think that 8-1 kind of is what everybody's kind of drawn to. You're not going to get it. But this is a horse. There's 2 things that I think are interesting. One, horse looked phenomenal first 3 starts of his career. And then he goes to the Travers, and he faces the best group of 3-year-olds we've seen run this year, basically, in terms of a crystallized collection of.
Yes.
And so he gets a terrible trip that day, and he just doesn't get to his spot. And suddenly he's sitting 5th. He's throwing his head. He's not comfortable. You could tell the whole time the horse was not happy with how things were going. And what I appreciate is the fact that Chad brings him right back at another grade 1. He's not dropping. He didn't see the Travers and go, maybe we have a grade 3 horse here. Maybe that was a little ambitious. Let's drop him down into something else and spot him here, cut him back to a 1-turn mile, something like that. No, we're going right back to a 2-turn grade 1 because that's the level of confidence we have. And that's a horse that has shown the ability to rate. previously. Now, granted, it's just sitting second, but doesn't need to be on the lead, can stalk from off the pace. And I think that's important to point out. And quite frankly, all three of his career wins are faster than anything Dragoon Guard's ever run. So I just ultimately landed on him in this spot. I do think Seize the Gray is going to have a big effort. That's a horse I'm really interested to see. For Dwayne Lucas, by his standards, coming off a massive layoff of 2 months, and so
Yeah.
so he's going to be fresh. And I think that's another horse that if he gets to his spot, if Jamie Torres can get him onto the lead going into that first turn, I think he's a different type of animal when he's up on there going 2 turns. So a lot of interesting tactics there. But I know the horse that you're talking about, and I'm a big fan of this horse as well. I'm using him underneath on all of my tickets, and that is Timeout.
Yes. No, that's right. Here's what I cannot figure out, Matthew, and it's bothering me a lot.
Yeah.
Which Seize the Gray are we going to get? Because the last time he came off a layoff, he ran in an optional claimer at Oaklawn. And then people forget he ran in late February. He ran in March. He ran in early April. He ran in May twice. He ran in June in that Belmont. Okay. So that horse was on his 7th race in that sequence. They finally give him a little bit of time off here, which, by the way, is a horrific angle for the coach. I want to be very clear. It's not a good angle for him as far as this amount of time off. It's like 1 for 20. I mean, it's not good. Okay. But this horse last time off a little bit of a freshening, and it was considerably longer before. I want to be clear about that. He took off like 5 months between races, something like that. He was great, though, after a freshening. I wonder if we won't get a little bit more of him with some better legs and those kinds of things. I think of the front-running horses in this race, he's the fastest. And so if he can get that lead, and Jaime, like you mentioned, if he can rate properly, man, good for him. I am so worried about the front pace of this race, Matthew. I think there's a chance, because of who's in this race and where they're going to have to break from and who they're breaking next to, we might see high 22s for the first quarter, or for the, I mean, like this kind of stuff. I mean, I think there's a real chance the half mile's like 45 and change. And that's too fast for Seize the Gray and those sorts of things. And yes, you're right. It is Timeout. And I don't know what to do with this horse, Matthew, except I know he likes to close. And if people don't know the stretch at Parx, he's going to have time to close. That's just how the course is stretched up.
He'll have plenty of time. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. The stretch, actually, if people don't know, it runs from Penn State to Philadelphia. So it's a longer stretch there in Penn State at Parx.
Yeah.
So he's going to have time to make up the distance there. And who's been better this year with this kind of horse than Bill Mott? The answer is no one. You talked about Arthur's Ride earlier. He screams Arthur's Ride in this spot to me, actually. This is the horse for me that actually reminds me the most of Arthur's Ride. I love the 10-1 kind of price. Man, I need Joel Rosario to show up like a man on Saturday for sure. It's one of those races. Go ahead.
Here's the thing.
He already lost on Match Wisdom.
There is an element to Joel where there are certain horses that fit Joel that I like seeing him on. This is actually one of those types of horses. So I like Joel when a horse naturally has a running style of coming from off the pace. What I don't like is when Joel gets cute and decides to turn like a stalking horse into a deep closer. And then we go, okay, Joel's doing Joel things. But when there's a horse that, like, I loved him when he ran Clairiere, because it was like, great, that's what you do best.
Great point.
Great point. Off the pace with these incredible finishes, and nobody out finishes Joel Rosario. And so the horse fits him from a pedigree standpoint, sired by Curlin, out of a Warfront dam. I mean, should want to run for days. I mean, distance is not going to be an issue at all, and is going to get that trip, because you figure a horse like Lonesome Boy is probably going to have to go. Seize the Gray is going to go. Doc Sullivan has some speed and is going to be a little bit forward, but you would imagine Timeout's going to be getting pretty close to the rail. Maybe the 2 path is not going to be hung wide in any way, like for Stronghold or maybe even Unmatched Wisdom or others. And so is going to save ground. And then Joel's going to kind of use probably that inside move that he likes to do and try to find some, and it's going to get, to your point, it's a long home stretch. It's going to be a strung out field. I guarantee it. There's going to be plenty of room for him to maneuver around coming for home. I think a 10-1 He presents outstanding value. He's going to be on every single one of my tickets in terms of my my horizontal plays, my pick fives, my pick fours. He's going to be on all of those. I'm not going to get beat by him. I'm going to say that. I like him way, way, way too much to leave him off my tickets. So I like that a lot. And, depending on what price Unmatched Wisdom is versus what he is, I might end up doing some win bets on him as well.
People talk about the end of horse racing a lot. People are very negative in our space about the end of horse racing. I have evidence of it. I have an eclipse vote. So the the horse in here that I need to win, Matthew, so that I get to have these debates for the rest of the year, essentially, is I need Seize the Gray to win this race. Because then he injects himself with multiple high-level grade ones, including a classic race in the Preakness, and this race in the Pennsylvania Derby, which we just named the last 10 winners numerous times on the show because it's that good. Okay. Yeah. He didn't show up in those other two races, but they were races 8 and 9 of his season that started in March. I mean, this is a horse that just ran and ran and ran. We all pine for the days when horses would run 10, 12 times a year. We get one, and the chance of him winning the Pat Day Mile, turning around, winning the Preakness 14 days later, and then running back and winning the Pennsylvania Derby in September, I think that would inject him seriously into the conversation.
It would have to, because if you take the names of the races away and you just look at the resume, he and Fierceness basically have the exact same resume: 2 grade 1s and a grade 2 win.
That's right.
That's the exact same thing. And so now, Florida, and by the way, that Florida Derby, please. That was an allowance race. I mean, you were talking about listed stakes plus. I mean, you look at that Florida Derby, woof. I mean, that was not a grade 1. And our late friend Chuck Simon, would always go on rants about, you can't there shouldn't be grade 1s to prep for a grade 1.
One. Right. No, he's totally right. Yes, of course.
Which is, God bless Chuck for that. And so the reality is that, then you look at Dornoch. Okay, he's got his 2 grade 1s, but that's and then a grade 2 as well in the Fountain of Youth. So same sort of thing. Sierra Leone, just kind of shows up and runs honest, but it doesn't win the big one. Hasn't won since the Bluegrass. And so, I think you're absolutely right. If Seize the Gray wins, then it's at least a couple more months until you get to the Breeders' Cup Classic, and then we'll see who ends up running the best out of that group probably, and that's who's going to end up being your champion 3-year-old. But I think until then, we'll see. And by the way, you want to talk about debates? What if Forever Young comes over and wins the Breeders' Cup Classic? Well, then now what do you do? Now
it throws everything up.
3-year-old.
Yeah. No, that's right. I could even see, just because I've watched his patterns before, I could see a coach being very comfortable going in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile with him, for example, with Seize the Gray. Yeah. Right. And then gives him a legit shot to be in that field. It's a 2-turn type of race. I think he would really like it. And so I wonder, if he actually might benefit from missing the Classic and having that kind of resume. And so it could be, obviously a lot to happen before we have those debates, but I need it, Matthew. You understand me? I need it. I need it for this show. I need it for my crappy 10 to noon show that I do. I need all of it. You understand me? And so I hope he's the winner of hoping, if you will. But frankly, let's say that one of our longer shots, Unmatched Wisdom or Timeout ends up winning this race. You know what? I'll throw in a Protective. Okay. What do we make then of this 3-year-old crop? Where are we after all of the major derbies are done?
I think we're in an evenly balanced crop that, there's not a standout necessarily. Fierceness, I have to say Fierceness certainly answered a lot of questions and answered a lot of critics when he won the Travers, coming back on relatively short rest. And, that was a little bit of a concern. Is he a horse that needs 3 months off in between races, basically, and being able to do things but he still gets kind of his own trip in his own way. We kind of talked about the others. It really leaves you kind of scratching your head a little bit without kind of a clear choice. And that's why I bring up That's why I bring up Forever Young. That's why I bring up City of Troy. These are 3-year-olds who are going to come over potentially into case the City of Troy only had ever run on the turf. Son of Justify is going to probably try to the Classic, according to Aidan O'Brien. It's fun to see. And I think that's why there's so much excitement about these international 3-year-olds coming back, because it is so unclear where our 3-year-olds stand. And I think that's honestly what makes the Rapido Anna so special, is it injects her into that conversation. People go, she's as good as any of these boys, if not better than 95% of them.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to watch her for sure on Saturday in the cotillion. But then going forward, do they go for it in the? It's just it's so nice. We keep getting these fillies. We've got Idiomatic. We've got her. It's just they show up every freaking time. It's just so
Yeah.
honest. The effort's so honest. It's going to be a great race. I mean, frankly, I'll be honest. In the Travers, I didn't know she was going to get anywhere near fierceness in the stretch, and she was, like you said, like everyone knows, she was right there. Just fun. I mean, just so fun having horses like this around.
One of the things I'll say, my colleague at Nair Bets, Kaylee Shapiro, brought this point
Yeah,
up, and it's something I hadn't thought of until she said it, which is she goes, "We've never seen a horse run up at fierceness when he brings his A game."
that's right.
And it was absolutely right that Sierra Leone
That's
was
a
kind
great
of
point by her.
grinding away on him and the Jim Dandy, but not in the same sort of way. You never thought he was going to get there. And, every other time Fierceness brings his A game, it's over. I mean, nobody gets close. And for her to do that when he gets his way, it was just so impressive. And yeah, it's going to be something to see. And, you mentioned Idiomatic. Before that, we had Malathat and Clairiere
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Secret Oath and these great horses. And, one thing I'll tell you tomorrow, I'll give you a question to ask Jess Paquette tomorrow when you have her on. Ask her about Mare Energy because she's got a good answer about that. That she
Okay.
chatted with me about it today. And I think that very much so applies to Torpedo Anna and maybe where she's going to go in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. And when you talk about a horse like Idiomatic and going up against older fillies and mares, I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
That was Matthew's way of usurping the fact that I have Jessica tomorrow and he had her today. So there you are. It's just, listen, we get it. We get it. You New York guys are a big deal, and us rubes in Kentucky have to play second fiddle. I get it. Oh, man. All right. Well, I think it's going to be, it's setting up to be a tremendous race because there's going to be three different storylines. Essentially, you've got the proven horses, you've got the unproven, you've got the front end speed, you got the closing speed, and there's a bunch of connections in here that are really interesting as well. So I think it's going to set up to be really great. I think we would do a disservice to the folks watching if we didn't talk about the Park Sprint to close the card. This is 6.5 furlongs on the dirt for 100K, 4 and up in this one. The only non-graded stakes that you and I are going to talk about listed, or black type stakes here, I should say, excuse me, underneath on here. I thought an interesting field here as well. Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't love a horse in here, Matthew, which I think sets up a really good closer at Parx.
It does. And there's a couple of 6-1 horses that I like. The number 9, My Buddy B, coming off a win last time out at Parx, going 6 or 6.5, I should say, kind of won in gate to wire fashion over another horse that I like a little bit in this race, which is Recruiter, the number 5, also 6-1 for Cathal Lynch. Those two are interesting to me. And are they good enough to win this spot? We'll see, but you're going to get, it's going to be interesting to see how the betting plays out in this race because there's a bunch of horses that are all kind of clustered around that 6-1 price. I'll probably end up playing against Super Chow a little bit. That horse just lugs out a little too much for me when you get past 6 furlongs. And so I always worry about that with him a little bit, but I think you can find some big prices in here potentially to close things out. And going to be interesting to see. I'm curious where you kind of landed in this one.
I'm interested in My Buddy B, actually, who won the state representative sprint last out. So the prep for this race at Parx, first time ever trying the surface, is won twice this year out of the Heatrick barn. And so I am interested at 6-1 if that horse can run that back. It is for Krista, that's a pretty good angle for her. She wins at 17%. It's a smaller operation for sure, but these are the kinds of races, frankly, that a horse like that can jump up and win, right? If we think of this as a black type, as a high level allowance, essentially, that horse can win here for sure. The Beyer speed figure seems to be consistently high 80s, low 90, runs a 97 once this horse gets to this 5-year-old son of Creative Cause, gets there. Ran in the Vanderbilt. I thought ran fine in the Vanderbilt, frankly. I mean, as the kids say, didn't show his ass or anything. So, it's I think a horse that could run a big race here. I love that 6-1 price.
Yeah, I think, whenever you see is, the grade 1 Vanderbilt and Nakatomi, Skelly, Twisted Ride. I mean, come on. I mean, those are good horses. Obviously, Twisted Ride in this race as well on the far outside. Yep. But yeah, I think you're going to get a much better price, partially because of what you just said, which is the connections. It's not Todd Pletcher. It's not Brad Cox. It's not a big time name. And so
or even a Jamie Ness at a local, right? I mean, it's not even
right.
That,
or Lou Linder or
right. Sure,
Bush
fair enough,
Reed
yes.
or absolutely. It's not even the Parx connections that you would normally see bet heavily. So I think you're going to get an honest price. And again, you look at the races this horse has run on dirt and pretty honest, overwhelmingly. I mean, this horse really shows up and kind of runs its race just about every time out. So, if you get 6-1, maybe it floats up a little bit. Who knows? And that'd be a great price and great way to close out the card.
And of course, Brad Cox, first off the claim, throws top gunner in here with Flavien Prat, the 7-year-old gelding. We will see what he does on the outside as well. I don't hate the outside post for 6.5 at Parx. I think it should be just fine as well for the connections there. The two of them only winning at 30% over a massive sample size, including places like Downs where, I mean, good luck. So there you are. Back at Churchill right now on our circuit, at Aqueduct right now. What should people be watching for as they play Aqueduct as well? Just because I know you're there all the time.
Yeah. So listen, we have a double pick six carryover tomorrow at the Big A, $159,000 double pick six carryover. So want to make sure you get in and play that. So we have a lot of stuff up on Naira Bets to help you out with that stuff, from track stats, looking at how the track is playing already during this first couple of days of the meet through the first weekend and now the first day. So always great stuff there. Have some previews of the Dogwood taking place down in Churchill Downs as well. I think that's going to be a really fun race. So that's up on Naira Bets as well. Got a lot of previews and a lot of analysis for all the stuff taking place at Parx. I'll be down at Parx on Saturday. So if you follow me at Failed to Menace or follow Naira Bets at Naira Bets, I'll be posting videos, interviews. Got to have Maggie Wolfendale, Lafitte Pinkai, Jess, the whole 9 yards. Everybody's going to be doing it. And so we're going to have a lot of fun with that, just keeping people posted about all the great racing taking place down there.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I am not going to Churchill on Saturday. Matthew, are you ready? Why? It's old man stuff. I hope you're ready. This is old man stuff.
I'm ready.
Within like a mile radius right there, they're playing a college football game, Louisville and Georgia Tech. They're running at Churchill Downs. They're running at Churchill Downs. And there is a music festival that draws 100,000 people to Louisville.
Get the hell out of here.
All within a mile.
Stop it.
God bless the Dogwood. Your buddy, your boy ain't going. I'm not there. It's just not happening. So yeah, it's just not. But I didn't even look. I should look to see who's on the main stage for Bourbon and Beyond on Saturday. I simply don't.
While you do that, I will tell you a very quick story, which is
please.
My dad. First of all, so I grew up outside of Philly. We used to go down to Eagles games. We left every Eagles game at the end of the third quarter to beat the traffic. Now, that was not a bad decision because the Eagles usually gagged the game away when I was growing up in the 90s. Now, that said, my dad applied the same logic to my college graduation. My last name, DeSantis. He stayed through the H's to see my friend Danny Hill graduate. And then he texted me and said, congratulations, I'm going home to beat the traffic. And when graduation was over, we go down to the football field and everybody's there with their parents taking pictures. And everybody comes up to me and goes, Matthew, where's your dad? And I go, he beat the traffic. He left already.
By the way, do you know the winner in that story is Danny Hill? It's not even close. I mean, it's not close, people. I want you to understand. Mr. DeSantis, who blocks everyone on Twitter, it's a whole thing. But anyways, yes, it's just how it goes. And he's a big show bettor. That's how he operates. Those $2 show bets. However, this man, shout out to Danny Hill. I hope you're doing well, buddy, because that's respect, dude. That's a high level of respect that the guy who loves to beat traffic hangs around for your freaking graduation and you're not his kid. That's high level stuff.
Right. Yeah. And Danny's doing great. He's going to appreciate that shout out. So he's doing well. Man. But my dad always liked Danny for some reason. Funny.
There you go. Hey, no, our parents always like someone more than they like us for sure. I married a fine woman. She's great. I love her very much. I think my dad liked the girlfriend before a little better. It's how it goes. All right. Well, this has been the Horse Racing Happy Hour. He's Matthew DeSantis. We'll get him out of here. Thanks so much for jumping on and the suggestions for questions for Jessica Paquette. I appreciate it very much.
Anytime, Louie, man. Appreciate it, man. So much fun.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. We'll get him out of here. I am Louie Rabeau. This has been the Horse Racing Happy Hour. Thanks for jumping on with us. Next week, we are doing a preview of the Cali Crown. First ever. So there's only one place for us to go on this show. We're going to talk to our guy, John Lindo, who is with Thoroughbred LA out in California. We'll make sure we get you set up for that. And of course, John lives just north of Del Mar. We'll start talking Breeders' Cup with him, what his expectations are going into that as well. As I mentioned numerous times, on the show. If you haven't found me yet, I'm on 10 to noon, Monday through Friday on the local ESPN affiliate here, ESPN 680 in Louisville. You can find me every Friday. We do a ton of college football, a ton of NFL, and of course, a full horse racing segment as well. So if you're into any of those things, feel free to drop by. You can find us anywhere in the world, ESPNLouisville.com. Again, I'm Louis Rabeau. This has been the Horse Racing Happy Hour for September 19th, 2024. And class, Gold Class.